So welcome to Finding Your Voice Through Self-Publishing with Mikael Shultz and Amiewalan. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder, along with my partner, Donnie Jojoba, of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is the space you find yourselves in right now. The Bureau, the short explanation for the long name is that we are a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And this is the service that we provide, is holding this space for queer culture. So we have regular bookstore hours, Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7. And then we do events sometimes during the day and sometimes at night. If you'd like to be on our email list, you can sign up for that at the back of the room, and you'll get an email every other Monday about our upcoming events. We are an all-volunteer organization. We have Max Nazario helping us out today. And volunteers, donations, and sales is how this boat stays afloat. So we have a suggested donation of $10, but if money is tight and you are planning on buying books, you should hold on to your money and buy books. But if you have some extra cash in here, you want to throw that in, there's change, please do so. It really helps us to keep doing what we're doing. So thank you very much. Or you can also send it to on Venmo to @BGSQD. Those letters are all around you, so you can't mess them up. All right, I'm going to do a brief land acknowledgement before introducing the moderator, Darius Somers, and then we'll get started. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We are actively seeking to partner with and provide material support to a local queer Indigenous organization. And we hope to make an announcement about this partnership in the near future. But in the meantime, we encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community House's Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. So you can make donations or find out more about the fund at mannahattafund.org. So I will introduce our moderator and we'll jump right in. Darius Somers is a registered architect. He earned his bachelor's in architecture from Pratt Institute and a master's in advanced architectural design from Columbia University. He has worked under the leadership of internationally celebrated architects and educators. The breadth of Darius's domestic and international body of work includes private residences, art galleries and museums, luxury retail, and mixed-use development. He has been the recipient of several prestigious awards and an invited juror at Columbia University Pratt Institute, Yale University, New Jersey Institute of Technology, and Parsons School of Design. He recently led a graduate level workshop at University of Michigan, Taubman College of Architecture, focused on decolonizing design pedagogy and praxis. He serves as an editorial board member of the Architects newspaper and as the co-president of the Black Alumni of Pratt, which provides scholarships, mentorship, and career opportunities for aspiring creatives of color. He is also visiting professor at Pratt's Department of Interior Design. Presently, Darius Somers is working on the Metropolitan Museum of Art Ancient Near East and Cypriot Galleries renovation. Very cool. And has recently formed his eponymous design practice, Somers Works. Please welcome Darius.
It's lovely afternoon. Yes. Okay, we're really excited. Thank you to Greg and all for having us and allowing us to have this event in this beautiful space. First, I just want to give you a brief rundown of this event. And so we'll do introductions, and then Mikael and Anthony will present some of their work. And then we'll go into a conversation, and then we'll open it up to the audience. And then we have a little treat by Anthony at the end. He'll be reading an excerpt from his newly released book, Jojoba. So let's get started. So Anthony Amiewalan is a first generation Nigerian American who was born in the South and grew up in the Midwest, and for a short time lived on the West Coast. He is now based in Best-Eye with his longtime partner, Dean, Anthony pulls from his Nigerian heritage, inspired by wood carvings, colorful geometric patterns, and clean, sharp lines to create his illustrations. He incorporates his experience living throughout the country, traveling abroad, and interpersonal relationships to develop what he calls a visual diary. Anthony's educational and professional pursuits have been in economic development, reinforced by his master's degree in urban and regional planning from San Jose State University. Although Anthony has never formally studied art, he has always loved painting and drawing as a form of self-reflection and meditation. And as an outlet for creative expression, he is the author of Jojoba, his coming-of-age story of coming to terms with his sexuality and redefining success for himself. Anthony is the illustrator of Visual Diary, a book of illustrations filled with colorful images that reflect his personality and inner thoughts. He works full-time as a public servant for the city of New York as the director of buyer services to encourage and support the thoughtful inclusion of women and minority-owned businesses in all city-funded projects to ensure the city of New York suppliers reflect the diversity of New York City. Next, Mikael Shultz is one of the most sought-after fashion photographers of our generation. He's known for his playful styling, heroic poses, purity of light and form, and keen eye for striking images. He continually collaborates with the top stylists and hair and makeup artists in the fashion industry and challenges himself to push the boundaries of his field. Mikael discovered his passion for photography at a young age while studying fine arts in high school in his hometown of Gothenburg, Sweden, and went on to study photography at the University of Gothenburg. In 1997, he took a leap of faith and came to New York City for his first time to study at the ICP, which is short for International Center for Photography, from which he launched his career and has been working in fashion ever since. If you haven't been, that International ICP Center is located in the Lower East Side. I highly recommend you check it out. His impeccable resume consists of editorial work featured in Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Elle magazine, among other celebrated worldwide publications. He has also produced 2 self-published books, Face of Beauty and NAKNA, which we'll learn more about later. Recently, he collaborated with BBC Reels on a short film about his book NAKNA that was released last year. Full disclosure, I've had the honor of being one of his models in NAKNA and some other folks in this room. It was featured in the BBC film. It was a beautiful and liberatory experience. Mikael's signature look derives from his rapport he builds with his models. He creates an environment where they can reach their fullest potential and always look their best. He continues to strive forward with a dead-on gaze, celebrating life, fashion, beauty, and form. So now we'll have Anthony present some of his work so you can get familiar, because we'll be talking about that more in depth, and followed by Mikael.
Okay. And so that's mine. We should do the other one.
Oh, Anthony's going first?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard. Okay.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Darius, for that introduction. It's funny because we've been friends for a while now. I think maybe 10 years. We've been friends for a while. Yeah.
What
and
happened?
usually, like, so Darius, Corey, Olivier, and other people in this room have a nickname for me. Has anyone ever watched a Ninja Turtles? So this one always called me April O'Neil. The guy in the yellow jumpsuit who's always on the beach trying to get, all the info, asking a lot of questions. And so it's fun to like have a role reversal where you're asking the questions and I'm answering them.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate everyone for coming. I'm thankful to the Bureau for allowing us to be in this queer-friendly space to discuss our work and to share our process with you all.
Sorry, I'm trying to turn off the subtitles, and that is not Doesn't seem to want to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it still screen sharing, Donnie?
In a second, there's a delay.
Okay.
Well, while you work on that, I can kind of also just talk about the motivation behind both a visual diary and a Jojoba. So, I think it's really important. I was reflecting on this, and I think it's important to have people in your life that act as kind of a co-signer for you and are that spark to help you get started with something. And Mikael was really that spark for me. During the pandemic, I was going through a really hard time. And my friend Mikael noticed that, but he also noticed some of the illustrations I was posting on my Instagram page. And, said to me, Anthony, you should share your work to other people. Like, why is it just designated to your Instagram? And it was kind of an aha moment in my head where I had never thought about that. And it wasn't really until you kind of said that to me that the gears started to turn. I started to think, oh, maybe I can do this. And Mikael invited me over to his apartment and surprised me with the whole photo shoot where he asked me to bring my illustrations in just so that we can go through them. But I didn't realize that you were gonna take photos of my pictures that day. And so he really became the foundation for me creating a website, me doing an art show, me have my illustrations on clothing, and ultimately me memorializing my work in a book. So I think that it's really important. I want to make sure that I stress this, the importance of community and having heroes in your life that really inspire you to be your best self. And I thank you for that. So I think the slideshow is working. It's working. Okay, so I'm going to go through each of the illustrations. So this first image is a self-portrait of me, and I created it August 20th. So it was during the height of the pandemic. And like I said before, I was kind of going through a depression. I was grappling. There was so much happening in the media during that period of time. It was the height of Black Lives Matter movement. COVID was happening, and so many people were affected by COVID, and there was so much political unrest. And I've always had this personal history of just never feeling enough, never really being comfortable in my skin, like my Blackness. And really, there was a series of pictures that came before this one, but this one really, which is titled Self-Portrait Self-Love. And this is where I made a commitment to myself that I'm gonna love myself, I'm gonna treat myself right, I'm gonna embrace who I am. And it became the cover of my book, but it has a lot of sentiment for me because it really was a tough time for me. And I was, at that moment, I really kind of made a decision to embrace who I am and love myself. And I think that that's something that we all should do that. So, okay, moving on. Maybe this one. Oh, maybe not that. Okay.
Technology is fun. Let's see. What are we doing here? Yeah, doing that, doing all the things. Jesus.
Okay, just go like that.
Oh, sorry. So, all right, we're back. So a visual diary, I want to back up a little bit. That the previous image was the cover of a visual diary, and it's a book of illustrations that I published January 2022. So now it's January 2023. It's a year old. It contains 100 illustrations that are organized by line, color, pattern, and mood. And so I'm just going to walk you through the organization of the book and a few of the images that are contained within it. This
image is self-portrait looking back. And so I start the book off with this image. And it's really me just kind of looking back at the progress that I've made in my life, kind of in terms of coming out and kind of learning to love myself and some of the hardships that I experienced. But then, you know, as I progress through the book, some of the successes and opportunities and the joy that I experienced as well. So I start off the book with line illustrations. There's this illustration, there is a few other ones that are just completely line. Here's another one. So this is walking on eggshells. And this image really is kind of, it's emblematic of being in relationships, or regardless if it's relationships with family, friends, or anyone, where you're not really completely who you are. You have to kind of not deny who you are, kind of not be fully present. And as you see the image, you know, there's no hands, there's no feet, really is kind of curled up as like an egg. And so this is those moments where you feel like you can't be yourself, and you're denied an aspect of who you are in any specific type of relationship. So from line, I move into mostly Black images. So images that have a high saturation of Black. And this is really, for me, Black is kind of a color that's synonymous with honesty, with a starkness. It either is or it isn't. There's no kind of getting around the color Black. And so I really wanted, and most of the images where I depict just mostly Black images, it really is kind of like coming to grips with something, you know, like confronting the truth of something. And so from Black, I moved to red, images that have lots of red in it. So this is not Dean. A lot of my friends believe this is Dean, it's not Dean. But the title of this, the title of this piece is called Triggered. And it's, as you can see, there are like little lines around the person's head, not Dean. But those moments, red for me is a color that is, you know, there's a lot of passion and angst, love and anger. It's just a very passionate color. And so in the book, I have lots of images that are grouped by red and Black, but it's supposed to kind of denote passion, anger, all those things that red is for me. And that's kind of me moving through, you know, when you build things up over time, then you explode. And this is kind of that, you know, denying who you are for so long that like ultimately you can't contain that for too long, you explode. And this is kind of what this piece means for me, kind of that explosion, like that mental explosion, that internal explosion that happens, that people don't necessarily see, but it's there. And so this image is self-portrait laying down. And this is the series of images that I created during the pandemic, where it would just, life felt very heavy. And really the only way to cope for me was just to meditate. And meditation, I started to do that through art. And it really kind of helped me grapple with the chaos that was happening during that time. So this actually was created June of 2020. And I created a series really every month that captured that angst, that internal angst that I was experiencing during that time. But it's in the blue period. And blue for me is a color of introspection, a lot of reflection and meditation. And so during that time, I was in my thoughts quite a bit. And this is another image of that self-portrait crouched down. And again, it was a difficult time for a lot of people during that period. But then I got out of that. So I really wanted to kind of get out of my head and focus on the things that give me joy, things that bring happiness and light. And yellow for me is a very fun, energetic, it's a life-giving color. And so I started to kind of diary about yellow and the happiness and the things that are happening in my life that I'm appreciative of. And ultimately, I got to a place where I wanted to move forward. So this piece is called Moving Forward. And it really is with yellow in the background, like, you know, progress has to happen. You can't stay stagnant, or I didn't want to stay stagnant. And so I was really focused on what can I do to move forward? What can I do to make myself happy? How can I stay in joy? And so I contemplated that during yellow. And then green is always color of resiliency. And I ultimately ended in finding my inner, you know, this piece is called Finding Inner Joy. So then that was a visual diary. Jojoba is really the sibling to a visual diary. And it's my coming of age story, as Darius said, where I really kind of reflect on coming out and my life in San Francisco and my ability to find happiness in romantic love. And so I'll be talking about that process today and doing a reading. So with that, I will pass the mic to Mikael. Great.
Sorry, 5 minutes. Yes, I'll do it fast. First, I just want to say hi, and I'm so proud to sit here today with two of my dear friends. Super excited about this. We are talking about how to self-publish and why and the benefits and whatnot. And I've done 2 books. The first one is called The Face of Beauty that I did with a makeup artist, Victoria Somers, who I loved working with her, and I just wanted to show her talent. She was so good with hair and makeup. So that's why the first book came along. Let's see here. And that's another image from that. But then I made this NAKNA, it's naked in Swedish. That's what it's called. So I was contemplating on what do I want to do if I didn't do fashion photography, and which I love doing, but if I didn't have that, what would I have done? And I'm like, nudes are always nice. So I started asking my friends and see if they wanted to pose for me. And so happily they did. And I just sort of explored, having no rules on what I was going to do, just following my intuition and my aesthetics and what felt fun, when did it become exciting for me. And it's sort of when it all became abstract, and sometimes where you couldn't tell where I was on the body. That's when it sort of tickled for me, and that's sort of the thread throughout the book. I'll just show a few here. And yeah, so it's mostly friends who are in the book. And what can I say more, Darius?
I'll just look for the images.
Yeah. I mean, so I wanted also they're all very different bodies, and I wanted to show sort of the beauty in any body that was in front of me. So it was me finding what I thought was beautiful in there. And all of them also had the criteria that I wanted to put them on my wall at home, that I would want to frame them. That was the sort of standard for making it into the book. And the book is also a poster book, so you can take out any page. It's loosely bound, so you can just take out a page and frame it if you want. So that's what's the idea. I think that's 5 minutes, right? Yeah. Just finding new ways of looking at the body. For me. Okay.
So you'll have opportunity to, well, Mikael and Anthony have their books that we're discussing today in the back. So you have opportunity to look at them in more detail. But we'll start talking about that now. So let's start this conversation. And you all touched upon this already, but just wanted to reiterate your motivations behind creating your book. You can share that one. I'll hold on to this.
Yeah, you go ahead. So yeah, I did kind of share a little bit of my motivation behind creating the book. Well, let me just back up. I think there was no audience for this book initially. Like I created these illustrations because it was a meditative process. I really use it as a form of therapy for both a visual diary and Jojoba. Jojoba really started in 2014. I just kind of was journaling about my experiences in San Francisco and coming out. And it was really a series of notes that I created during like a 2-year period. And then I set it aside for a long time. So there was no intention of creating a book. But I was inspired by my work with Mikael and then just the evolution of things that I was doing. The art show, like the website, all these things. And so it just felt like a natural step to, you know, memorialize the work in a book, especially through my example with Mikael. So that was really kind of how it started for me.
I'm glad I inspired you. He just took a little bit like I just needed to help along a little bit, and then you just ran, and that's why we're here today, because you just are so creative and talented. I mean, it is nice to do a book. It was actually my brother who said, like, you should do a book, and I'm like, oh, me do a book? And the more the thought marinated, the more I felt like, yes. So I mean, it's not often that you do a body of work that you put together and have a physical thing that you, it's an accomplishment, and it's really like, yeah, it's wonderful. And so I'm so glad that we both, yes.
But I also think that it's interesting that your brother was the spark for you.
Yeah.
So, you know, in doing something like this, it's a lot to put yourself out there. I mean, when you're creating a book, you imagine that people are going to consume it, they're going to purchase it. And so, you know, there's a lot of energy that goes towards putting into creating something like that. But then also there's fear, like maybe no one will respond to it, or maybe no one will like it. And so like, you kind of need someone to spark, to kind of be a co-signer for you and like kind of say, no, I believe in you. You can do this. You're talented. Like, show it. And so I'm glad that your brother was that for you and you were that for me.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see or hear your stories of how community was a catalyst for your creative process. So the next question is, since this topic is about self-publishing, all the work that you see here has been self-published, and I understand that it can be quite involved. So why did you decide to go the self-publishing route?
Yeah. So, you know, for a visual diary, I felt like that was probably the only path that I could go. I mean, I'm an unknown artist. I have a relatively small social media following. And it was an art book. So it's kind of a hard sell to sell an art book to a publishing house. And so, and also I really wanted to learn the process and take control, which I think we're going to talk about the process a little bit later. For Jojoba, I did consider traditional publishing. I shared my book by query letter, and I looked at some publishing houses and received a few rejections. I did receive interest in a nonprofit publisher in Brooklyn, but it took him so long to get back to me. And honestly, I just felt like I had the energy to do it and the motivation to do it. And so, you know, I decided to go the self-publishing route.
So Mikael,
Yes.
as a world-renowned fashion photographer who works with major publications and has an agent and is like all set up, why did you not leverage those relationships, and why did you leverage those relationships and go in-house like publication versus doing it on your own?
I mean, the first book that we did shop it around, and the thing is, like, you have more control doing it yourself, and I think that's why I did it. It was also not, it's not like I've done these 2 books to gain money, because self-publishing is really not, you're not earning any money. I mean, I broke even on both books, which I'm so happy for. So it's you do it for your passion, something that you want to do, and if you're lucky, you break even, or you earn a little bit on it. But yeah, so that was not my motivation. I just sort of freely wanted to do what I wanted to do and publish them by myself. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit more into that process that you all started to share. So where did it was weird we talked about that. Could you walk us through a little bit more about through your development process and how you decided on the layout dimensions? Like, I really want to understand like the details of all of the different aspects of the publishing process that you went through.
Should I continue? Well, first I sort of just deep dived in taking pictures and sort of seeing where it all led. And then I slowly started to seeing the work, and then I asked my friends to come and critique it. I think that's very important, to ask around, like ask your community for help and guidance. And Darius was very kind, coming and like looking at the work several times, I think. So yes, and then I had help with an art director on both books. I've had 2 different ones, and the first book, I didn't love everything about it. We were collaborating with this really fancy Swedish magazine, and the art director there sort of had control over the book in a way. We were supposed to be thankful for them doing it. And in the end, like, there's certain edits and things that I wasn't super happy with. And so I wanted this time around, when I did it the second time, that it should be like exactly, I should feel proud about everything. And yeah, I worked with a great art director on that one. Do you want to cut in, or did you have a question?
A little bit. I am curious if you can just share, like, what is the one thing or 2 things that really stood out in your experience in publishing the 2 works that are quite distinct from each other?
I mean, the first one was a collaboration, and the second one was just me and friends that I took pictures of. But it was more a deep dive into my aesthetic and what I wanted to do, and to do it in such a free way was so lovely. To go into a project not knowing what it is that you're gonna end up with, and yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, the audience is happy with that response. So Anthony.
So both processes were different. A visual diary is an art book with illustrations, and Jojoba is a memoir. And so I had to take 2 different approaches. For a visual diary, it felt more organic. You know, most of the work was already done. Mikael took the majority of the photographs, so he took a lot of the photographs that I ended up using for the book. The thing that I had to learn, the resources that I had to use and creating a visual diary is kind of Photoshop and Illustrator. Like, I didn't have those tools, and so I had to figure out kind of substitutes for those. And so I YouTube is so awesome. I use it for everything. I have YouTube learning how to tile walls and, like, you know, do electrical work. I'm a YouTuber. I'm a very visual learner, and so I YouTubed different resources that I could use to do the layout, because you know, in an art book, you definitely want the layout to be aesthetically pleasing. And even though he took photographs for many of the pieces, there were still like some imperfections that need to be corrected. So I use canva.com, which is a really amazing resource. It is free 99. You're able to.
Can you repeat that service?
It is free, canva.com. And there's a lot of Photoshop type elements that you can use in that resource. I also use Paint, and I use that actually to cut out some of the images from the photographs and change the backgrounds. And so for a visual diary, I also worked with, I had a little copy. And so I implored like my friends to help kind of review some of the copy and the titles to make sure that things were grammatically correct. And there were so many issues. And so I'm glad that I did that. But for Jojoba, that was a different process. I collaborated with professionals to help me make sure that the book was grammatically correct. So my process, it happened in 6 stages, you know, obviously writing it, which the actual, like, it was an 8-year project, if I'm to be honest, but like, you know, it was notes in the beginning part. I sat on it for a long time. And then I, you know, really worked on it intensely for a year. But there's the writing, there is the developmental process, which was, you talk about critical feedback, you know, the feedback that Darius gave me. Like, I had 6 beta readers, like read to make sure that the content made sense, like the story arc, because even though it's a memoir, you know, you still want it to read and be entertaining for someone. And so you want to make sure you're telling kind of a story that's compelling, that makes sense. There are like lessons learned, all those things. And so I had beta readers kind of read through it to make sure that like the content was strong. And actually, I received some very tough feedback, from a good friend who I adore. But he, you know, he basically said, "What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Is this a tell-all, or is this something like, you know, like, what are the lessons that you uncover? Like, what is it about you that you want to share to a reader?" And so I was able to really get that through that developmental process. Then there's copy editing, where I hired an editor on Etsy. It's a really great resource if you're looking for a freelance like designer or editor or something like that. Like Etsy is amazing. I hired a phenomenal editor from Portland, and he helped with the copy editing, which is about making sure the intent, your language intent, is accurate, is what you want. He also did proofreading. And then lastly, I hired a book designer through Etsy as well. And so like that, the Jojoba actually there were a lot of contributors. You know, when they talk about Beyonce's album, and like there's always contributors. You know, I love Beyonce though, but you know, I do. I'm like a beehive
For the record.
But there are lots of contributors to Jojoba, and I'm glad for it because I'm proud of the final product. I think you should be proud of what you create, and I'm glad that you're proud of it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, one thing that struck me is this idea of the community being very much a part of this process. Right? I'll share a little bit about the conversation I had with Mikael, because his line of work, he's often working with very stunning models, and they have a particular physique and presentation. And when he did this first pass, it was a lot of those figures there, and majority of them were men. And we just sat down, and I'm like, what, again, that question your friend asked you, what are you trying to achieve here? What is your audience? What's your greatest aspiration? And I really pushed back, and I'm like, is this really representing like nakedness and it's all its representations? And I told Mikael, like, it's not just about inviting your friends, but actually stepping outside of your comfort zone and reaching out to people you may not know, thinking about all the different forms of body representation. And so it wasn't just your conventional athletic physique, but and you can talk a little bit more about that. and how that really was a moment in that creative
Oh,
process.
definitely.
And what that
No,
meant
but-
for you.
Yes, no, you know how much I appreciated that. And I mean, you don't grow or like, you need community and you need friends to sort of make you step out and look at things from a different perspective. And sometimes you're stuck and you can't really see. So asking your friends and people that you trust about your work and I mean, it always comes down to you anyway. You're the one who decides, but whatever sticks in those conversations that you have with others, listen to that and make those changes. So yeah.
What's particularly about this, I think it's interesting how your work there's a history there in photography and taking photos of new bodies, particularly those of color. And I think of I know Robert Mapplethorpe, and some of his work was quite controversial, and how your work departs from that is looking through that medium photography through the lens of inclusion, which I found to be quite powerful.
I mean, I am a white male, and I was like a white male looking at bodies and bodies of color and all kinds. And so I didn't like, so I turned the camera on me too, of course, to be included in it all. So I'm also in the book, which I thought was important. And I mean, through the process, I learned that I maybe sexualized some parts, which, yeah, I mean.
And I think that's a valuable.
I didn't want to, like, when I looked through, I didn't want to sexualize certain.
Yeah, and it's being mindful of, you know, you approach a project and you might not have an audience in mind, but you know, once you put your work out there, it's open to scrutiny, right? And you, through that creative process, you give yourself the opportunity to really try to kind of shepherd or not so much control, but do your due diligence to try to strike the tone that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And again, we'll be opening this up to questions from the audience shortly, but we have a few more questions. So we talked a little bit about the production phase. Now, I know that it was quite involved, and we touched a lot about, we covered, Anthony, you talked a lot about that process, but Mikael, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the minutiae details, because it's quite a beautiful book that you put together. And I know that you have worked with someone. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. I mean, for me, I use Photoshop for all my pictures, and I wanted the quality to be good when the printing was very important to me. And like printing your books is like, there's lots out there, and you got to do proofs to sort of see how it all looks. But NAKNA was also like, I wanted it to be environmentally friendly as well. So it's printed on a non-carbon waste paper, and the quality, like, so in my hometown, there's a printing place called Göteborgs Tryckerier.
Say that again.
No, Gothenburg printing. Yeah, and they do beautiful like printing. It was actually better than the digital, whatever I could get digital. Like their printing is amazing. So,
and talk about your experience with coordinating shipping.
Oh yeah. What shipping, everything, like it's costly doing a book. And so you got to find a printing place which suits your needs, like the quality and the money. So I chopped around in Poland and Portugal, like I checked around everywhere and asking.
And why not the United States?
I did it here too. There's one in Brooklyn that I also checked out with, but it came that the cheapest and the best for me was
outside.
It was in my hometown of Gothenburg. Yeah.
Very interesting. So when it came to share your books to the public, I kind of touched upon this a little bit earlier.
But maybe we should ask Anthony how he, what kind of published companies you did, because
Yeah.
it's different.
I thought we covered that.
So my
Yeah, we
process
did, maybe.
was a little different than yours in that like you had your suppliers in Sweden and you decided to purchase books up front. So you had so much inventory that you were selling.
Yes.
Whereas like I decided to go the on-demand print route where I like worked with blurb.com, which is, you know, for a visual diary, I worked with blurb.com and was able to like find really great paper quality. I think the quality of the paper is like 100 pounds, which is basically like 500 sheets. If you have 500 sheets and you weigh them, you know, that's why it's 100 pounds. But I work with blurb.com for visual diary. And then for Jojoba, I actually use Ingram Sparks, which is a really great distribution outlet where if you decide to self-publish, you're able to use them and your books are sold on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and all the major retailers. So like I decided to go the print on demand route because I didn't want to have inventory. I know that, you know, you have quite a bit of inventory.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, if you have the audience, then that makes sense because your units are more affordable. But for me, like, I just wanted to make sure that my costs were cut low.
What do you mean by units?
Just, you know, like the upfront amount of inventory that you have with books. So like, you know, if you bought like 100 units, then you get a discount in terms of like the number of books that you buy from a printer. You know, it's 40% less as opposed to like buying one book.
That's good. I mean, for all of you all, first of all, raise your hand if you've had experience with publishing a book. Okay, so some of you all know this process. Okay, so you know, we're nerding out a little bit here, and, but it's good to know that some of you all are familiar and the process resonates with you. So let's talk about your target audience. Anthony, I found it quite interesting when you said when you started your the book, Jojoba, there wasn't a particular audience, but when you think about putting your work out in the world and who will read it, and both afar and near, family, friends, what have you, how did that influence that process, what you shared, what you didn't share? Did you find it to, how did that affect your creative process?
That's a good question. You know, when I first created both Visual Diary and Jojoba, you know, I didn't really have an audience. I was just creating for myself. I wanted to document kind of the progress that I had in my life up until that point. And so I wasn't thinking about that. But then, you know, when you're creating for public consumption, then the intent is really important. Like, why is it that you're doing what you're doing? You know, especially a memoir. Like I said before, when I had a really good friend of mine read it and really gave me some harsh critique. Like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And so I had to really dig deep, especially for Jojoba, because a visual diary is, you know, it's illustration, you can interpret it as you will, but Jojoba, you know, they are words from me. And I want to make sure that the intent was to help the reader get insight into my life as a gay, Black, first-generation Nigerian American, coming to terms with who they are. And I want to make sure that I respected the people in my life and, you know, share their stories in a way that was respectful but was truthful.
Have you received any feedback on your books? They're not finished. What was some
I have. You know, it's funny because I have received feedback and it's been mostly positive. Like from my family, I've received feedback from my younger brother who we just had a really long conversation about just growing up and, you know, some of the challenges and opportunities kind of growing up in the context that we did. for my dad, you know, because a lot of it is around that relationship and, you know, not want to disrespect or disappoint him. And I think it's interesting, like, there's a saying that he always say, like, never let them see you sweat. He'd always say that, like, never let them see you sweat. And I think he wouldn't, you know, it was hard for him because it's like, why would you open yourself up to feedback and critique? But I think that when you do that, that's when the most opportunities for growth.
Gym of wisdom there. Mikael, how about you?
Of what?
It's the question I had was more directed towards Anthony, but like, what was your target audience, and did that evolve as you were developing the work?
I didn't have an audience in mind. I just wanted to do. It's all about no, but really, like, I think it's important to like delve into yourself and try to squeeze out the best there is. And yeah, that's what's the process really. And then, I mean, it's self-published. So I'm selling in some bookstores and I'm selling with friends and things. It's not, so yeah.
Okay, but was there a decision-making process in the type of stores where you have your books available?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you send it around like when you know what it's going to be, and when you're sort of going into publishing, which I did in pre-publishing, and you try to get as many. I did my own work. I'm like trying to get press, trying to get different bookstores to sell the book, and then also putting a website on and doing it online.
But real quickly, what stores had your work on their shelves?
Well, I'm very proud that Strands had it, because that's a place where I always went to the style section. They had where they had all these great books, and they took in my book, and then when I came up the stairs like to the second floor, and they had the style section, my book was placed there, and that was like a really proud moment. So yeah, and like I'm very proud being here now, selling my book here. So yeah.
So just be mindful of the time. Kind of ran over. Time flies when you're having fun, right, guys? And y'all. So last question: what do you want people to take away from your work?
Well, I hope beauty. And
what does beauty mean for you?
Yeah, I mean that with NAKNA, the new project, a lot of people have been like a little bit like thought it was like, I mean, but since there are very different bodies and people have reactions to different bodies, so I think they're all beautiful, but like hair is a thing with nude bodies that are like controversial. I feel people react to. There's like a toe in there with lots of hair, and a lot of people are like, oh. But I just think it's really like the shape of it is beautiful, and I do like the hairs are amazing. So, I mean, it's to everybody look at stuff and take away whatever I hope they find something that they like, and I hope they remember it a little bit, and then I feel I achieved something.
I would echo that. I hope that people get, for a visual diary, I hope that people enjoy the playfulness of the images, but also are able to, find their own meaning and interpretation. See something beautiful about it. For Jojoba, I hope that people, get that success looks different for everybody, and that it's important for you to define your own definition of success.
Great. Thank you for your responses to give us to opening up and sharing about your process and learning more about you. Again, these are friends of mine I've known for quite some time. And so I had the pleasure to kind of witness this whole process, but I'm glad we have a forum in which we can share that. And hopefully you all are inspired to, share your stories through the medium of in self-publishing, if that is something you're interested in. So we're going to open this up to the audience. Please. So,
Well, you got me
yes.
first.
Or
I'm
you
sorry.
can ready to give you the microphone, but
I talk pretty loud.
you can project, okay.
When you started talking about due diligence, I got to say that a little red light went off in my head. As far as art goes, I mean, you're an architect. You're an architecture, right? Which is almost always a collaborative thing. I mean, unless you're Philip Johnson building yourself a glass house in Connecticut, you're always collaborating.
Yeah.
But I just think that that it's almost a death blow if you're telling an artist that as he or she walks up to their canvas with a brush in their hand, before they touch it to the canvas, they should do due diligence and make sure that they're not going to paint anything that might be offensive or not inclusive. I think that it's just a death to an art. I mean, if I'm taking photographs, I'm out in the street taking photographs, and I've taken thousands, and I have to stop to think before I take the photograph. Is it proper to take this photograph? I mean, you're not going to have any photographs at all. Are you going to have very dull photographs?
No, I appreciate that question. I think what the intent behind or use of that word due diligence may not be the most appropriate, but as an artist, it's the work that we produce is relational. And if as humans, as artists, we do have blind spots. And I was aware of Mikael's intent behind this work. And so this was a conversation and it resonated with him. And so this was around the inclusivity of his body of work, which he was really trying to strike.
I'm trying to say it negatively resonated with me.
Yeah.
Because I'm an artist and I don't want to have to, I'm trying to come out of my own head. I'm just not taking the entire world into account. I'm not taking the politics into account. I'm not taking the community into account. My photographs have been on the internet. There've been thousands of comments about them. I know what my community thinks about them, but I didn't think about that when I was taking them.
So let's
Yeah.
take it to Mikael.
Yes.
As the artist.
I mean, I'm so thankful that Darius pushed me to widen and to me to explore more different kind of bodies than I'm used to. I mean, there was a big woman that I photographed after we had spoken, and it was so liberating for me to find the beauty in her body. And yeah, to me, it was just positive. I mean, but also looking at your work that's going to come out in the world. I mean, of course, if you want to be provocative or like, however, like, what do you have for responsibility on thinking? And I think that's up to any individual, what they like, what do I want to say? So I'm thankful for the feedback that I got, and that helped me look at my work and yeah.
Yeah, and it's different from everyone. You wouldn't want to impede your creative process if that is, you drive the direction what you want to put out into the world. So thank you for that question. Anyone else? Jabari? I'm gonna start calling him a friend. Because y'all are real quiet and I know y'all can ask questions. Yes.
I kind of like to make this conversation. I do agree that you don't necessarily want to silence them while you're creating. But when you're putting a book together and then such is controversial, you kind of do need that feedback. I recently published a novel and I knew that I was approaching the very on purpose. Point of my book pointing up the finger in the eye and culturing a little bit, but I was thinking like, oh, this is safe, this is okay. Particular scene in my book that I do, problematic, but I'm okay with that. And then I got feedback from a friend of mine, and it kind of pissed her off. And then I went and I changed the passage in my book. I was like, oh, I'm feel that. But then I stepped back and I kind of realized this was the time I kind of have the conversation about food. Do I piss off a bunch of readers and have people that are just worried or do I tame it down and might cause a conversation? Eventually I stepped back and I realized this friend who gave me this feedback, she was going to respond. And so I kind of patted myself back and said, yes, that's the response I want. She's not my core reader. I want her to respond. So I changed the passage back and I published it with that in there. And so it kind of made me feel that I had that moment of, okay, I got checked, but screw that. This is the message that I want to put out. It poked her in the eye, and that's what I wanted from that reader. So I think that moment is important. But I do kind of agree that's not where you want to start creating. That's where you kind of want to go back and edit.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here. And so I really appreciate this conversation. For those who have published work, have you all had a similar experience? Or could speak to that process of, you know, before putting it out in the world, you're kind of sharing it amongst your community for feedback to kind of decide how you want to kind of calibrate your work before you put it out in the world. Or ask any other question.
I had a SUNY Press up the University in Albany wanted me to do a book about stories about my artwork, and they wanted me to take out a few of the little stories I had because about circle jerks with the guys in high school, and I did take it out, and
But why
I
take out
sort of
circle jerks?
regretted it, you know, but they paid me money. They paid me to do the book, and it was my first book, and it was my last book too. I'm working on one now where it's my truth, and so I'm glad I had the experience. It wasn't a big deal that it didn't really change the whole thing. Most of the stories stayed totally intact, but I do have regrets about that, you know. But the book got out, and you know, I made some money.
And so there are a couple of things that you say that are quite interesting because you went the traditional publishing route, right?
They approached me.
They approached
My
you.
artwork was known in the area.
And so there is the question of agency and how much you have that type of relationship where they're probably fronting you money, right? And so they have a little bit more say on the content.
Right.
And so what is with self-publishing, what we've learned is that you have a lot more agency. But again, as they shared earlier, they just broke even. And so those are the things that you have to, from what you all are sharing, those things you have to take into account.
And my question was, when you self-publish, like you did the on-demand books, so they only print them as their sort of, you know, order. And you have that, is it still possible to bring one of those to a publisher and get a major publisher to, well, even after you've gotten the, you know, the Library of Congress copyright thing?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
that, yeah.
I'd like to do that and then, you know, bring it.
I don't think publishers like that from what I've read, but there have been cases where someone self-published their work and they've been able to get that work picked up by a traditional publisher.
Great. More questions? So as we're gonna probably take 2 more questions because for the sake of time, I want to give you all time to read these lovely books and make some purchases.
So I self-published my novel in October, and
What's the name of your novel?
Edison in the Hood.
Ooh, okay, Edison, please give us a little blurb of what Edison is about.
I wanted to hear more about your self-motion process, moving beyond just the friends and family who really get it. Like, what did you have to do? I don't like doing it, but I feel like you have to. So We'd love to hear your experience about that.
Yeah, so beyond friends and family, I approach bookstores to get them to sell my books. So I'm selling at 2 bookstores in Brooklyn, the Word of Change and Greenlight Bookstore. So in addition to that, you know, you do need to approach friends and family. I approached a friend who had a connection with the magazine Afro Chic, and they did a piece about a visual diary. And, you know, obviously I'm doing this book event here. So it's kind of a new process, but like you kind of just let people know that you're interested or that you publish something, and you'll be surprised kind of some of the opportunities that you can get that. I know you have
I mean, it's your platform, like the people that you know, like talking about your book. And then I always say also, one email is no email. So you gotta stay on and find whatever, like, yeah, knock on people's doors, be in people's faces, but in a nice way. And that you have to determine how that is.
Shameless.
I mean, you shouldn't feel bad about yourself. So it's, you know, nobody's ever gonna offer you to do anything. Like the 2 books that I've done, nobody's just like, oh, please, can you do this? You gotta do it yourself. And I'm really happy that I have these 2 books, and I'm very proud of them. So.
Do you think the second one helps sell the first one?
And no, they're very different. The first one, I mean, there
No, but I
was.
mean, like, did people become more aware of the first one? There any of that? No.
Not that I know of, no. I mean, some people know me as the photographer that I am and follow my work, so they kind of knew, but yeah, I had, like, my friend Anna, she works at BBC Reels, and they did a small film about it. I didn't ask her, but it was very sweet of her to do. And then that people from all over the world have then asked for the book or bought the book, which I feel like so happy about.
Thank you. Oh, we're gonna. Oh, one more now. Okay.
So I did not raise my hand with being a self-publisher, so to me it's a very scary process. I'm just curious about the confidence it must take to put your work out there. And I'm curious for the 2 or 3 or anyone in the room who has self-published, where do you think that confidence came from?
I mean, you gotta live a little.
What does live a little mean?
To dare to do what you want in life. And I mean, we all can like be like, oh my, I don't matter. Like that. But we are, everybody's unique. Every human being is unique, right? And finding that uniqueness and sharing that to the world, I think, or to just your friends or whoever it is, I think that's everybody's life purpose in a way, to figure oneself out and share that. So there's room for all voices. Yeah.
That's well said.
Okay. You sure?
No, that's
I believe there was another hand raised.
I wanted to ask you, I think Anthony, you said something about not having a footprint or a large audience in social media. And in the world that we live in today, I'm just wondering, like, is that on purpose? Being a visual artist, that you don't have that following or built that up yet?
It's grown, right?
It has, but so yeah, I wasn't seeking it out at first. Because you know, I was posting illustrations on my personal Instagram page, but you know, if you want your work to be consumed, you have to build it. And so I created an Instagram account, and you know, like I've been promoting my work, but it's not, even though it may seem like it's natural, it doesn't feel natural. So it is kind of like this plug and pull in terms of like promoting your work, but then also like, you know, not wanting to. But yeah, like you said, Mikael, like if you don't put yourself out there, like things aren't handed to you. And so like if this is, you know, and I've
Sometimes they are.
well depending on
Sometimes they are.
yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions, or are we gonna? Okay, so the last bit, Anthony is going to read a brief excerpt from his book, Jojoba. So,
Thank you.
How are we with time, by the way?
We're good, okay.
I'm seated comfortably now, waiting for my flight. I can't believe I pulled this off. An hour ago, I was supposed to board a plane to Antigua, and now I'm off to San Francisco, California. My name is Anthony Amiewalan. I'm a 25-year-old, first-generation Nigerian American. I studied medicine at the Medical College of Wisconsin for the past 2 years. After barely making it through the first year and struggling with symptoms of lupus the second year, I withdrew. My father, a doctor, convinced me to try medical school again in the Caribbean. He was sure the environment would be less stressful and the weather more conducive to studying. Medical school wasn't my first choice for profession, but I did not want to disappoint, more importantly, disrespect my father. In Nigerian families, children are taught that respect is demonstrated through obedience. It's not uncommon for fathers to make significant life decisions for their children. Marriage and career are fair game for an overtly strong-willed Nigerian parent. Besides, I could not stop at a bachelor's degree. Education is highly valued in Nigerian culture. Having a doctor or engineer as a son or daughter is the ultimate status symbol of successful parenting. The achievement shows the world that you not only care about your child's development, but it's a personal reflection of you. I took this last point to heart. My failures personally reflected on my father. I wanted to be his example of success, but I later learned that the idea of success that he envisioned and that I sought to manifest was not meant for me. It would take years for me to come to this realization, but at the time, I felt broken. So why San Francisco? Well, the idea originated from an experience I had in high school. I visited Stanford University to participate in mock trial. I was, and still am a nerd. That trip to the Bay Area was my first solo trip, and it was liberating. Despite the short time frame of 2 weeks, it allowed me to form an identity independent of my family expectations, and I took advantage of it. I felt wholly anonymous and bold, which empowered me to take on a new persona, one that didn't require my father's approval at every step or corner. I relied on the mask that I wore with my friends, which was that of a straight teenager who was highly committed to extracurricular activities, being pleasant, and in my mind, competing with classmates to prove my self-worth. I always felt that I had something to prove. With friends, it was whether I was good enough or not, the stereotype of what it meant to be Black in America. As a Black teenager attending an all-white school, and with the world, I felt the need to defy their expectations to mirror Black excellence. Once in high school, while visiting a friend's home built in a wealthy suburban community, I distinctly remember a short exchange I had with his mother. He entertained me in his well-appointed basement. The rooms had gray walls and white trim. It housed a movie theater with leather recliners, chairs, and vintage French posters on the walls. She brought treats for us to enjoy as we decided on a movie to watch. As she set the refreshments on the table behind us, she commented that I was a good, quiet boy, and that she was glad her son had me in his life as a positive influence. Many parents and friends thought similarly of me. I craved this validation because it reinforced the hopes that I represented myself and my family well by a standard that even a white mother approved. The trip to San Francisco allowed me to step outside of the white gaze, become less rigid, and just be me, whatever that was at the time. I left for San Francisco mainly because I needed to run. I ran from the possibility of being a failure and of letting my family down. I ran from the burden of being the firstborn son. I ran from the expectation of living a heteronormative life. Most importantly, I ran from the version of myself that I couldn't control. I needed to run, stop, breathe, and figure out who I was and what I wanted. I didn't feel like I had the space to do that at the time, so I ran. However, my decision not to attend medical school came at a cost, figuratively and literally. My mother took $17,000 from her savings account to help me pay for the first semester of school. This was an expression of her love. Years earlier, while I was figuring things out between college and medical school, my mother arranged for me to have an apartment in Columbus, Ohio. She paid for all my utilities and allowed me access to her credit card for spending. I was taking classes at Ohio State with plans to enter public health graduate school. She didn't want me to worry about anything but focusing on my studies. My mother did this same with all my brothers and sisters, even after we left home. She wanted to ensure our physical needs were met. My mother didn't think twice about giving me her hard-earned money. She trusted me and believed in my success. I accepted this money knowing I would use it to start my life in San Francisco. At the time, I was deeply conflicted about taking it. However, I justified my action by telling myself that the money would be used to help me build my future. After arriving in Decatur, Illinois, I changed my flight destination from Antigua to San Francisco at Atlanta's International Airport. At that moment, I came up with the lie that a family emergency had occurred in San Francisco and that I needed to change my flight. Surprisingly, the reservation attendant didn't question me, and the entire process went smoothly. The tickets were roughly the same price, and the attendant graciously waived fees for changing the flight. An hour later, I boarded the 4-hour plane trip to San Francisco. The flight was a blur. I don't recall anything other than the landing announcement. While I arrived in San Francisco, I retrieved my luggage, withdrew $100 from the ATM, and hailed a cab to go downtown. Before I left Decatur, I did a small amount of research on hotels. I wanted something cheap and found one that only charged $25 a night. It was already midnight as I rode into the city. I recall peering through the window, watching the rolling hills and the densely packed houses with lights scattered over the landscape. It was far different from where I grew up in Ohio. The community where I lived had large suburban homes spaced far apart with carefully manicured lawns and street lights on the corner of every block. After 8 p.m., most families were home for the night and the streets grew quiet. Not too distant from those communities, farmland dominated with even less evidence of human activity after dusk. I should have been scared, but I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what happened next. I felt liberated, excited and fueled by a sense that everything would be okay. The cab stopped on Market Street between 6th and 7th. I didn't hold high expectations for the hotel, imagining it would be like a Motel 6. However, I soon found out it was far worse. The manager was comfortably seated behind metal bars in an oversized armchair, watching television as I entered. I provided my name and my reservation number. He asked me for initial payment, informed me that the amount was due each morning, and gave me the keys to my room. No other questions were asked. And there was no interest in engaging in conversation. He turned back to the television and continued watching the show. The room was like a prison cell. It couldn't have been larger than 10 by 10 feet, with twin bed covered, with thin, moist sheets, a small table and a chair, and an old boxy television. There were no windows in the room, and to my surprise, there was an in-unit bathroom. I soon discovered a community bathroom down the hall. which may have been why the hotel was so ridiculously cheap. It wasn't until a few years later that I learned that I'd checked myself into a single room occupancy, an SRO. In San Francisco, even if you're gainfully employed, it is not uncommon to have 2 or 3 roommates. So if you are bordering on homelessness, there aren't many options. The SRO provides an opportunity to maintain a baseline shelter, shelter. Unfortunately, SROs were notorious for attracting mixed characters, often who struggled with drug addiction, mental illness, or were involved in sex work. Undeterred, I put my suitcase on the desk, I sat on the bed and finally processed the day. Even in my grimy surroundings, a sense of relief swept over me. I made it. I defined my father, my mother, and my own self-imposed image of acceptability, and decided to take a chance to discover what I wanted for myself. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I became the author of my own story, one that I would dictate, transcribe, and publish.
Purchase Jojoba and read the rest of that riveting story. And this concludes today's event in self-publishing. Again, we want to thank the Bureau for hosting this event and just being so gracious with the planning and coordination. Also, want to everyone give a round of applause to Anthony. And community, and we thank all of you all for coming out this lovely afternoon. Please hang around. Please give to this to the bookshop through purchasing books, Anthony and Mikael's work, and hang around for a bit. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye all.